My name is Chenue Her. I am a journalist. I am a news anchor at Local 5 News here in Des Moines, and I primarily anchor Good Morning Iowa, the morning show. I'm a huge Minnesota Timberwolves fan, and I love the Minnesota Timberwolves, good or bad. I am a ride or die for my Wolves. I am a sneaker collector, so I love Michael Jordan. I think he is the greatest human being to have ever lived. I am also a longtime member of the Asian American Journalists Association, which I'm really proud to be a part of. So I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, on the east side there. Growing up Hmong in St. Paul was awesome. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. It's awesome because you are always around people who look like you, who understand you. And I can tell someone I'm Hmong and they don't really think twice because they know who we are. They're familiar for the most part with who we are. Yeah, it was just nice to be around that. I don't think I really realized how just blessed I was to be around that until I moved. And people would always ask me, are you Chinese? Are you Korean? Are you Vietnamese? And I'll say, oh, I'm Hmong. And they'll look puzzled. Oh, are you, so you're from Mongolia? No. Then I'd have to spell it, and then we get into this whole conversation, which I don't mind. I actually kind of like that. It gives me the opportunity to talk about Hmong people. It's always like a big family get together. You know, you walk into a restaurant and you always know somebody. You know, you go to the store and you run into somebody you know, and they always are able to make a connection on how you might be related, you know? So I grew up with 3 sisters and a brother, so big family, 5 kids, and it was fun. I loved it. You know, typical Hmong family of that generation, right? You have a lot of siblings, and so I loved it. Never a dull moment. Now we're all grown. We all have careers and our own lives that we live, but we still talk every day. We're still very connected, and I see them all the time when I go home. Once we all graduated from college, a few of us kind of moved around, but they're all back in St. Paul now. I'm the only one that's not back, but it's nice being in the Midwest because it's such an easy drive to get there and see them. So yeah, they're all back there, and I'm here in Des Moines. Well, the thing about my grandpa and my grandma was that like they lived in Sacramento, California, and I grew up in the Twin Cities. So you know we would travel to see them, but it was cool because like I would see them a couple times a year, but they were very influential in my life in that I think they always made sure that we knew that they cared and that they were invested and that they were watching to make sure that we walked a path in life that was going to really set us up to succeed. And so I always appreciated that. They always held us accountable. I think that's one thing that even now I always think about it, like just how important accountability is, because my grandparents and my parents were the kind of people where they always held you accountable. They don't cut you slack just because you're their kid or their grandkid. They always held us accountable and held us to a standard that they held us to a standard that they pushed us to reach, but they always made sure that they supported us so that we reached that standard. And so, yeah, the accountability was big. My parents always pushed me to never try to be the smartest person in the room or even think that. And so they always stressed to me that it was important for me to listen and to learn. And so whenever I had an internship or I went to a new station, I always did my best to seek out those that I really wanted to learn from and just ask questions and listen and learn. And so I've had really good mentors in this business who have helped me tremendously. I mean, without them, I wouldn't know what I know or have the courage to do what I do and, just build a career that thus far I've been really proud of. My name is Chenue Her. If you're Hmong and you see that name, you know that I'm Hmong. There's no question. Early on in my career, I had gotten potential offers, but the contingency was they wanted me to use a stage name. For me, I just was never comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable in my own skin as a Hmong American, and I'm willing to do a lot, but that was something I was not willing to do. It's important to me. It's important to my family. It's important to who I am. And my parents didn't do all they did, and my grandparents didn't do all they did for me to chase this dream and get to where I'm going and then change my name. So to me, it was deeper than just use a stage name. I didn't want to do that. My first job actually took me to Eugene, Oregon. So I went to the West Coast, was there for almost 3 years, and then I moved clear across the country to Virginia Beach to be a reporter there. And I was there for 4 years. And then from there, I got a really good reporting opportunity in Atlanta, Georgia. So I moved to Atlanta for almost 2 years. And then I came here to Des Moines, and I've been here since 2021. Being Hmong and moving to Des Moines was a much easier transition than I thought it was gonna be. I knew that there were Hmong people here, but I had never met anyone. But when I announced that I was moving here, because I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I announced that I was moving a month before I actually moved, so many Hmong people in Des Moines reached out to me and just said, hey, and they welcomed me here. And so when I got here, I felt connected already, even though I hadn't met anyone yet. And so I went to the farmer's market the day after I moved here, and I met all these Hmong farmers and vendors out there. And many of them I had already connected with on social media. And so it was cool. I just kind of felt plugged in and at home right away. When I look back at my time in Oregon, what I will always remember about it is it was my first big move away from home for my family. I grew up in a Hmong family. You don't really stray far from your family. You don't move across the country and live on your own. I didn't have any family in Eugene, Oregon. I didn't know anybody. I moved there strictly for the job. I had never been to Oregon before. So I moved there just for the job because I was chasing a dream. It really taught me how to be out of my comfort zone. It taught me how to use what my parents gave me as far as tools on, how to navigate life. It really taught me, it really made me use those skills and those tools and experiences. And I remember calling my parents all the time because it was tough, right? I'm so far away, they're not a drive away. And so that's one thing I remember most about Oregon is just a lot of growing up as a person and as a journalist. It was my first journalism job. What I will always take away from my time in Norfolk, Virginia is how much I can learn when I keep my mind open and I am intentional about listening and learning from the people around me. Because when I moved to Virginia, I don't think I had ever in my whole life even thought about moving to the South. And I did it because of the job. That's kind of how I sold myself on it, right? For me, it was a culture shock because I didn't see a lot of Asian people there. But I tried not to let that dictate how I was going to enjoy my time there. I just tried to keep an open mind when I got there and really learn about that community, learn about that area, learn about the people around there. I felt so embraced there. That's why I stayed for 4 years, because I fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. It felt like home. I felt embraced. And I learned just so many things there that are so beneficial to my life and my career today. And some of my best friends in my whole life now are people I met there. When I moved to Virginia and I lived there, it was when my life really took another turn for the better. and added another layer of depth to who I am as a person. My time in Atlanta really helped me as a journalist elevate to a level that at that age I didn't think was possible. You know, in local TV news markets, it's a top 10 market, which is big. And for me, it was one of those markets where when I was younger, I didn't know in my whole career if I could ever make it to a media market the size of Atlanta. And when I did, it was not only a dream come true, but it was also a moment for me to realize I had to step it up. I just loved being in an environment with journalists who have been doing it for as long as I've been alive, and I could learn from them. But also the culture in Atlanta is just so rich. You know, it is just very rich. It's very deep-rooted history. I was there for almost 2 years, so about 2 years. In that time, so much happened in the world, and a lot of it was centered in Atlanta, in Georgia. And so from a journalism standpoint, it was very impactful to be there while all of that happened. As a person, it was just learning more about a state and a region that I just wasn't really familiar with. I think in my own mind, you know, when I made it to Atlanta, I was happy. You look at the list of media markets, younger me would have been like, I don't know that I'll ever make it to a top 10 market, you know, and I did, and it was something that I was really proud of. And so when I was in Atlanta, I'm like, I'm gonna stay here forever. Up until that point where I moved here, for years I had pursued opportunities to anchor. It was something that I really wanted to do. It wasn't about just simply being an anchor for me. It was a little bit deeper than that. It was a little bit more personal than that, just based off of some personal goals that I had relating back to my grandfather who passed away in 2020. I just feel like I was never really given a fair shake and never was really given the opportunity to do so. You know, I never took it personal or anything like that. I just always kind of gave myself that challenge that, you know, one day it's gonna happen. I don't know when, I don't know where, but one day it's gonna happen. The Good Morning Iowa anchor job kind of popped out of the blue, and the station management at the time reached out, and I didn't really know what to think of it or how to feel about it, because I loved being in Atlanta. I loved the job, I loved the station, my coworkers. I was a little conflicted because do I leave this behind and move to Des Moines, Iowa for an anchor job, something that I had pursued? I think what ultimately gave me the go ahead to move forward with the job and move to Des Moines was I did have conversations with my parents about it, because I'm Hmong. I'm in my 30s and I still need my parents' permission to do everything. I talked to the station management about it, you know, kind of what they envisioned for me, what my role would look like. I think the fact that they didn't put any pressure on me to change who I am, they didn't ask me to change my name, to use a stage name or anything like that, which I had been asked to before for an opportunity to maybe get on the desk. I never took it because my name is really important to me and to me being Hmong. And so when Local 5 reached out and they had no intention of asking me to do any of that, basically come as you are and that's who we want. I think that was kind of the green light for me. And then when my parents said, yeah, we think you should grasp this opportunity because you've waited for this, you've worked for it. I think both of those things kind of gave me permission to move forward with it, and I've never regretted it since. One of the biggest challenges I think I've faced in my career being in TV news is simply just how I look. For most of the history of this industry, this is not what a news anchor looks like. And I think until there was a lot of awareness brought to it in recent years, that was a mold or an idea, a vision that I really had to try to break through. And I didn't do it alone. I mean, that's why I'm very active with the Asian American Journalists Association, because groups like that, groups like the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. These groups come together and they understand these things, and they work to change the industry for the better. Because what you see on TV or what you read in the paper, journalism should reflect the communities that we serve. Not every person in the community looks like that ideal news anchor, right? And I think that's been the biggest challenge for me, is just proving that I am a capable and successful journalist, but also I look like the people that are in our community. Whether you see them around all the time or not, they're there. I have been very, very, very fortunate that there have been Hmong American news anchors that came before me. And they're all women who broke that glass ceiling so that I can do what I do. And they have kicked the door down and they blazed the trail for me to walk after them. And they're still in the business. Most of them are still in the business today, and they're just doing it. They're doing it, and I'm lucky that I can do it now because they did it first and they kind of set the tone. And when I wanted to go into journalism, TV journalism specifically, I remember my parents being nervous because they didn't know if there was a space for me in TV journalism. But when I connected with these Hmong women who were doing it and were successful at it, that gave my parents the reassurance and the confidence that as long as I worked hard and I took it seriously, that there was going to be a space for me. Right now, I'm the only Hmong anchor in Iowa, but I don't feel alone because they're just a text or a phone call away. Even though they work in other states, we're very connected. One thing that they all have done that has proven very successful to them, that they've always encouraged me to do, is just staying true to who I am and knowing why I'm doing this and knowing why I am in journalism. Using who I am, from my upbringing to where I'm from to my family story, using that to motivate me to do what I do every day. And it brings a perspective that's unique to just me. If there's an up and coming younger Hmong journalist who wants to be a reporter, who wants to be a news anchor, I would pass that same piece of advice to them, is just knowing who you are, knowing your story, and being comfortable in that, and using that to motivate you to tell the story of others, and knowing why you do what you do. I think the why is a really big component, because journalism it's hard. It's a lot of deadlines. You get rejected a lot. But if you know your why, hopefully it motivates you to keep pushing through it all. So I was a reporter in my previous stations. So I was a reporter. I was out in the streets. I was turning stories every single day for all the shows. Here I anchor Monday through Friday. I do the 2-hour morning show. I still turn stories, but I just have more time to work on them. And what I enjoy about being in Des Moines is when I do turn stories, I have a little bit more freedom to choose what I do stories on. I think a lot of the stories that I've done here are stories that I find really filling for my soul, and I find it very re-energizing, and they're stories that I'm always proud of. Every time they air, I'm very proud of them, and I hope that the people that have graciously given me their time for these stories that I get to share, I hope that when they see it, they're proud too. The way I approach journalism, the way I approach TV news, no one owes me an interview. No one owes me their time. So if you take your time to talk to me, I'm always going to be grateful for it, and I will always give you my best to make sure that the story is accurate and is told in the best way that I can possibly tell it. When I moved here, I wanted to be very intentional about telling stories in communities and neighborhoods that reflected people that probably historically here have never really seen their stories on TV here. And so that was something that I really set out to do. You know, if it takes me a little bit longer to set up a story, or if it takes me a little bit longer to write it or to edit it, I'm very grateful that I have managers that allow me to take the time, because we do want to tell your story in a way that you're gonna walk away feeling proud of it and feel seen and heard. I think storytelling is in my DNA. I think storytelling is in my blood. I'm Hmong, and we didn't have a written language for most of our history. And I just remember growing up, always hearing my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles, they tell stories. They literally will just tell you stories. We have story cloths. That was how we communicated. That was how we passed on our history to generations. And so I always enjoyed that. I always enjoyed listening to the stories. I always enjoyed telling the stories. I didn't know that there was a career in it. You know, I just knew I sucked at math, I sucked at science. My 4 siblings are very good at that. I'm not. So I had to kind of find a way to figure that out. We grew up without a lot of money, so we didn't have cable, we didn't have all of these things, right? And so my parents used to always just have the local news on, because it was just always on. And so we would grow up with the local news on all the time. And I just remember my parents always talking about the journalists on TV, the news anchors, the reporters. My parents were always like talking about how they looked so successful, they sounded so smart, you know, and so to me that became sort of the vision of an American dream, sort of the vision of success and something I wanted to chase. And so I think when I was old enough to realize what journalism was, it is telling stories. That's kind of when I put it together and I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. And this one is an Upper Midwest Regional Emmy Award that I got in 2022 for a story that I did. It means a lot to me because I think it meant a lot for my parents. You know, I brought my dad with me to the Emmy Awards that year, because I got 2 nominations that year. One, my dad was stoked. My dad was so happy. My mom was super happy. The ceremony was in the Twin Cities, and so I was staying in my parents' house. So me and my dad got home kind of late, and my mom like got up and was like, "Did you win? Did you win?" I was like, "I won only 1 of 2," and she was like, "What? Like you won 1?" And so yeah, she was really stoked when I brought that trophy home, and yeah, it means a lot to my parents, and so that means a lot to me because of that. Just years of them seeing me through hard times and really good times, but really hard times, and they supported me through so much. So yeah, when I got that one, I was just glad my dad was there to see it, and he was so happy, and yeah, that means a lot to me. And so this Emmy Award that I got was for a story that I did up in Ames, where a young boy, his dad is visually impaired. So he's almost completely blind. His dad walks him to his physical therapy appointments every day, and they have to cross a really busy intersection in Ames. The boy ended up writing a letter to the city of Ames asking if the city of Ames would be willing to put an audible crosswalk at the intersection for his dad, because his dad's visually impaired. And so he wrote this letter to the city of Ames, and the city ended up doing it. They put this audible crosswalk up at the intersection, and so now when his dad crosses the street, the crosswalk will audibly count down, and so that his dad doesn't have to guess, oh, it's safe to walk or it's not. And he walks his dad, he guides his dad every day from their home to the office and back. And so his dad walks him to school every day. And so yeah, he wrote a letter to the city, and they put that crosswalk in there. And yeah, I went and talked to them about it, and they shared their story, and yeah, it's just one of those stories that kind of leaves an impact on you. So when I submitted the story for an award, I titled it "Never Too Young" because it's what it is. You're never too young to make a difference or to speak up. For a young kid, he had the awareness to understand that this isn't just going to help my dad, but it's going to help other people like him. One thing that's important for me and one thing that motivates me is there are stories all around us that are worth hearing, worth sharing, worth telling. But some people, they don't think that their story is worth telling for whatever reason. And when I come across some of these stories, and I'll reach out or I'll approach them about it, and they'll be a little iffy about it, and I will tell them, like, your story is worth sharing. I think there's impact in it. I think there's interest in it, and I think it's the kind of story that people will take to, because not everybody wants to hear about doom and gloom in politics every single day, because I think those stories are worth telling. And it's not just in one corner of our city, it's everywhere. When I look for stories, I make sure to, venture out into all parts of our city and not just one corner, not just downtown, not just West Des Moines, but East Side, South Side, Ames, Fort Dodge. I kind of go all over the place. Making history is cool, winning the awards is cool, but more than anything, I want people to just know that I cared. They just know that I cared. I don't take for granted any stories that people were willing to share with me. I don't approach stories and conversations with the mindset that I was entitled to that. I just want people to know that I cared. Even though I haven't lived in these cities for a very long time, every time I'm there, I cared, because I lived in those communities. I knew people there. I invested my time and my life in those communities, and I cared. I covered stories with care, and I always have tried my best to do right by people. I view journalism as a public service, and I just hope that people will one day know that, like, I take that very seriously. You deserve to know about what goes around, what's going on in the world around you, and you deserve to have your stories told. The life of a journalist is always hard to predict, like years from now, where I'm gonna be, what I'm gonna be doing. But regardless of where I am and what role in journalism I'm in, I hope that I'm just in a position where I can still tell stories that are important to people around me and the communities around me, and that I can still be in a position to where I can use whatever platform I have to make a difference. And I can tell stories for people who maybe felt like they've never had a story worthy of telling, or just have never felt heard. I also hope that I just make my family and my home community proud. I'm not perfect by any means, but I sure as heck try to do the best I can to make my family proud, to make our community proud. I think the Hmong community and history, I think we've gone through a lot, and we've also, in the last several years, have seen a lot of success and have seen others thrive. And, I hope to just be a small piece of that, and then also uplift others who come up after me to just continue to thrive and make our community proud. Getting in the anchor chair wasn't just it's just not the simple act of getting a promotion or sitting in a chair because I wanted to be a news anchor. It's deeper to me and it's more personal than that. When I first got my job in Oregon, I remember showing my grandpa at the time the very first story that I did that aired on TV in Eugene, Oregon. He lived in Sacramento, California, so went down to visit him and I showed him the very first story I did. It was so bad. I looked so awkward on camera. I sounded really bad. My writing wasn't good. My clothes didn't even fit. But he was so proud. So proud. And it asked me at the time, oh, when are you gonna get to sit in the chair? When are you gonna get to sit in the chair? And I remember telling him, yeah, it takes time. You gotta kind of work your way up. You kind of have to work your way up to get there. And he was so eager for one day when I get in the chair. And, I didn't have the heart to tell him, like, I might never make it, but I just said, yeah, I'll work hard to make sure it happens one day. And, he passed away in 2020. I was still in Atlanta at the time and I was a reporter. And at that point, I obviously wasn't an anchor yet. And even though he had passed, it was still really personal for me to make sure that I did it, because it's not going to be just my legacy, but it's going to be his and my grandma and my parents. And so to me, it was deeper than just becoming an anchor. It was something that my grandpa, who survived a genocide, who fled to this country to give us a chance to succeed, it was what he envisioned. It's not just a chair that I get to sit in. It was like the chair that my grandpa has always envisioned that I would get one day. And to him, I remember him saying that what made him so proud was being Hmong, where he's from, you don't speak out of line because that could get you killed. And he said, I can't believe it's my grandson that gets to report the news and gets to be on TV and speak and people listen. I think the older I get, the more that has meaning to me. At the time, I was in my early 20s just trying to figure it out. But the older I get, the longer I'm in journalism and the more knowledgeable people in this business that I meet who have done it way before me, who I learn from, I think the older I get, the more like that has meaning to me. And I still hang on to that, because that's a big part of my why I do it, and that's something that I will always remember, because I think my legacy doesn't really have much meaning to me if my grandpa's legacy or my parents' legacy is not a part of it. So it's very unnatural for me to do things or to pursue goals or to pursue anything in life. It's very unnatural for me to do it thinking about just me, because that's not how I was raised. It's not who I am. It's not the culture that's instilled in me. And so when I make big decisions or when I set goals, I always think about my family as well. And I always seek their advice, their input, so that I feel like I made a decision that made all of them proud.